So how's the tour been so far?
Intense.
I can see that. I saw a little bit yesterday.
Oh, you did?
But,
Birmingham came up.
alhamdulillah, I was thinking. Alhamdulillah, Allah yainak. It's nasib.
Those for the program is a few housekeeping rules. Can I ask all the brothers and sisters, if you can, please just turn the phone on silent or off, inshallah, the rest of the program so that we can benefit and it doesn't interrupt the live transmission of the program. If there are any available brothers and sisters who would like to be invited to start the program. Alhamdulillah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can all brothers and sisters invite me? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. MashaAllah. It's an honor to be here in Nottingham again with our dear friends from the KQZ, Brother Walead, Omar, Sister Marie, and everybody who have been incredible in hosting us so far, and I'm sure it's been an incredible evening today in Nottingham. So this is day 6 of the tour with our dear Shaykh Walead Mosaad, who's visiting, currently residing in Dubai. He's visiting the UK with Ustad and Lenny, his beloved wife. Many of you may have attended the children's session just a little bit earlier at Madrasa. Alhamdulillah, we have the beautiful honor of also having another one of our dear teachers from Liverpool, who currently resides in Liverpool, Shaykh Aziz Fredericks. And this evening, many of you have seen the actual title of the program, which is all about grappling the NAFS. I'm sure this will be unpacked by our two other teachers. But the format of the program this evening is it's going to be very different, especially that we're going to have obviously a brief keynote address from both of our teachers, so about 15 minutes from Shaykh Aziz and about 20-25 minutes from Shaykh Walead Mosaad. But most importantly, they want to also hear from us. So they're going to open the floor. They will start the conversation after the keynote addresses. The Shaykh Aziz will start the conversation with Shaykh Walead. And then inshallah we will also have the opportunity to ask our questions to both of our dear teachers and most importantly to Shaykh Walead Mosaad. without further ado, I'm going to invite Brother Zaid to come to the front to bless us with the Quranic recitation, and thereafter we will hear the address by Shaykh Aziz and then Shaykh Abdul Mosaad. Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
سبحان الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واعلموا أنما غنمتم من شيء فأن لله خمسه وللرسول ولذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل إن كنتم أموالا واعلموا أنما غنمتم من شيء فأن لله خمسه وللرسول ولذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل إن كنتم أمواتا فأحياكم ثم يميتكم ثم يحييكم ثم إليه ترجعون. صدق الله العظيم.
Bismillah, we'll have the first keynote address from Shaykh Abdul Aziz on the topic of grappling the NAFS. And inshallah, we'll hand it over to our dear teacher, Shaykh Abdul Aziz Fredericks. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله وصحبه حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. I think I have to begin with a disclaimer that I only came to see Shaykh, and I heard there was a conversation with him, so I just came to have a chat with him. So I haven't really got anything to say, but because Wasim, I love him so much, if he tells me to do something, I do it, even if I don't do it well, and I apologize in advance. So I did scribble down a few lines of poetry, because apparently that's what Sufis do. So, all right? Tayyib. So the lines of poetry might help us to at least get this conversation started. And the first lines of poetry are in Arabic. وَاعْلَمْ بِأَنَّ الْقَلْبَ وَالنَّفْسُ بَلَ اللُّبَّ وَالرُّوحَ بَلْ وَالْعَقْلَ أَسْمَاعٍ جَاءَتْ نَقْلًا وَالْقَصْدُ مَعْنَى وَاحِدٍ يُدْرَى وَلَا يُشَاهَدْ. And what the meaning of this is that you should know that there are several words. بِأَنَّ الْقَلْبِ, the word heart, and the word nafs, and the word lub, the word ruh, bal al-aqla, all of these, even the word intellect, have all come in the Quran and the Sunnah. All of these words have come in the Quran and the Sunnah. Ja'at naqlan. Wal qasd, and what's meant by all of these words, ma'na wahid, have all one word, have one meaning. What is it? Yudra wa la yushahad. It's something which you all know exists. We all know that this concept, this thing exists, wa la yushahad, but it cannot be seen. So what do we mean by this? We mean the thing within you, which I'm going to call the spirit for now, just because I can't come up with a better word. There's something within you which makes you who you are. Alhamdulillah, Yusuf introduced himself today. What did you say your name was, Yusuf? Yusuf? Yusuf what? Philip Yusuf. Right, he's Philip Yusuf. Is he Philip or is he Yusuf? Is he Yusuf or is he Philip? Or is he Philip Yusuf? Whatever it is, there's something which makes him him. Yep. Whatever it is, I don't know exactly what it is, but there's something there. And that's gone on a journey. From being who he was 20 years ago, to who he was 15 years ago, to who he is now, to where he's going to go soon. And eventually, that thing that makes him Philip Yusuf is going to be there present in front of his Lord. And his Lord is going to speak to him. Just as his spirit had already been spoken to many, many, many years ago, where Allah said to him, Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I not your Lord? Is that right? And he didn't turn, well, actually, my name is Philip Yusuf. What did he say? Bala, of course, shahidna, I bear witness to that. Now that entity, I can't see it, but I know it's there. Yudra wa la yushahid. Now what are we going to call it? Because I'm a bit not so good in this language stuff. Are we going to call it the spirit? Are you still happy with that word? Yeah? All right. Let me go back to the poetry. Wa'alam bi'anna al-qalb, the heart. Maybe it's his heart. How's your heart? It's good. It's still beating, but that's not what I'm talking about. Because that heart is going to stop one of these days. But that essence of who he is going to continue. He's still going to be Philip Yusuf after the heart's finished. So this word heart has got a different kind of meaning. And the word in Arabic is qalb. Qalb means that which turns. All right? It turns from this way and that way, this way and that way, this way and that way. All right? But in the end, it's on that journey. Qalb wa nafs. And this is the word I think I was supposed to be talking about, isn't it? Have you read the poster?
I think so.
Because I think Idris, you know, the little guy at the back, somebody asked him, what's your dad talking about today? He says, nafs. I think, oh, he knows more than I do. So the word nafs apparently is what I'm supposed to be speaking about, but it's the same thing. But I'm going to come back to why the nafs is slightly different. Well, a lub. The word lub's a beautiful word. Anyone been for Hajj lately? Anyone been for Hajj? Full stop. Yeah. Actually, it's question mark. Should know that question. All right. When you went for Hajj, what did you say? Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. You know what it meant? Don't say, here I come, O God, which is what it's usually translated at. What it really means is my lub belongs to you. My lub is coming to you. My Abdul Azizness, whoever I am, is yours. Whatever it is inside me that makes me who I am, it's all yours. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Bal al-lub. Waruh, spirit. Wal aql. And what makes me think. Because there's something inside me that makes me different to an animal. Because I can make choices. Based on whatever this thing is inside me. It gives me the chance to make choices. So all of these words is what we're talking about, right? And it goes through a journey. And it goes through levels. And I think what I'm supposed to be talking about is the nafs. Yeah. And I think you told me it was something about the nafs goes through levels. Is that what I'm supposed to be talking about, Wasim? Right. So, this ego, because the word, all of these words are used in different contexts. And the word nafs is usually used in the Quran, usually in a kind of negative context. Although all of them are the same thing. But when we use the word nafs, it's usually something negative. Whereas we talk about the heart or the spirit, it's usually something positive. And I think that's what Wasim wanted me to talk about. But of course, I gave my disclosure, I ain't got a clue. Right, what is this nafs that he wants me to talk about? He said it goes through levels. I'm just going to think in the Quran, what are the levels? The first one, the Quran tells us, Inna nafsa la amarata bis-su', that the nafs commands you to do evil. I can see someone with a Nike shirt on, right? You know Nike? Just do it. Yeah, just do it. The nafs al-amara says, just do it. Just do it. Just do it. All right, just do it. Just do it. And that part of you which says, just do it, is what we call the nafs al-amara. Amara means it tells you, just do it. You haven't got the aql, you haven't got the ability to grasp, or you haven't got the heart to turn to Allah. You haven't got the lub, labbaik Allahumma labbaik. You haven't got all of that. Why? Because you've just got the nafs, the bit of you which says, just do it. The nasty bit. Doesn't use the brain, doesn't use the heart, doesn't use the spirit. It just wants you to do it. Just do it. Don't worry about consequences. That's what we translate as the ego. Why? Because the nafs at the lowest level is just do it. But it does change from that. What does it change to? Let me think what else it comes in the Quran. La uqsim bin nafs al-lawwama. Allah says, I swear not by the nafs al-lawwama, which means he's swearing an oath by this thing he called or died. Those last moments, you look at them and you think, how peaceful. Yeah, you know that. Why? Because their journey has taken them to the al-mutma'inna, peaceful. You know, there's people that have been in so much mess. Friend, uncle, he hasn't got a name, it's just uncle. Right, I went for Hajj with him. Worst Hajj I ever did. You're allowed to say that? Shaykh is just smiling. I'll take that back. It was a love Hajj. If you were allowed, if you're permitted to say the Hajj group from hell, which you're not, so I'm not going to say it, but it was tough. And everyone was giving me a hard time except this one guy, uncle. He didn't give me a hard time. I loved him. And I went 36 hours with no sleep, no food. I was tired and I was fed up. And I got back to the hotel and I thought, alhamdulillah, it's 12 o'clock at night, everybody's going to sleep. I'm going to get some sleep tonight. I walked in and uncle was waiting there. And he said, Shaykh, will you take me for tawaf? And I looked at him. And alhamdulillah, I was in Hajj. Otherwise, I would have punched him. Why? Because the nafs al-amara, just do it. But he was so nice. I just looked at him and my heart melted. And I said, yeah, uncle, I'll do it. And I did tawaf and it was the best tawaf I've ever done. It was amazing. I was energized. And of all the people on that group, I only remember uncle. I can't even remember his name. And when I left that group, I was living in America and I thought, yeah, I'll never see them again. So I'm really, you see why I'm not supposed to be here? I ain't a sheikh. Sheikhs don't think like that, but I did. And I thought, but I love uncle. And I told uncle, I promise you I'm going to see you next time I come to England. 3 months later, I came to see uncle. I wrote, this is before data protection. I phoned the tour organizer. Uncle, can I have his telephone number? What he said? You don't know. Uncle died. And then I knew why it was so special. He was ready. His nafs was at peace. Nafs al-mutma'inna. And when he died, an angel came to him and said, Ya ayyuhatan nafs al-mutma'inna, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya. These are the next two levels. He was not only at peace when he died. I wasn't there, but I'm sure he was completely satisfied. And Allah was completely satisfied with him. So these are the levels of the nafs. And I've said enough. I came to listen to the Shaykh, so can I stop here? He says I have to do one line of poetry. And the reason why is because while I was driving down here, somebody said, you ought to quote Rumi. I thought, well, is that what Sheikhs do? That Sufi stuff? So apparently I need to quote Rumi, otherwise I'm not really a Shaykh. And you know I ain't a Shaykh anyway. So I'm going to quote Rumi and pretend. So Rumi said, the ego, is that what it's about? The ego. The ego is hell. The ego is hell. And hell is a dragon whose fire cannot be quenched by oceans of water. I'm going to stop there because I haven't got a clue what it meant. I'm going to hand over to the real Shaykh. To finish, إذا حضر الماء بطل التيمم. The water is here. I'm finished now.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على حبيبنا وقرة أعيننا قائد الغر المحجلين وشفيع المذنبين وسيد ولد آدم ولا فخر محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه وبعد. So it seems like Sidi Aziz pretty much said everything I was going to say. And it's kind of auspicious because really the first person that I kind of met from the UK who really was inspirational was Sidi Aziz. And that was back in Leicester at the Markfield Center, where we did a program together, taught together, and I was quite young back then. Sidi Aziz looks exactly the same. He hasn't changed in 30 years. He's always looked like this. You look at pictures of him 30 years ago, it's the same person. But the rest of us have aged a little bit, hopefully a little bit wiser, but not really apparent yet. But we're working on it. So the NAFS. I was thinking about this as we were coming over and yesterday, and I think one of the things that the modern world sometimes deprives us of is hope, and that we kind of are pigeonholed into a particular identity, and that you are who you are, and we have proverbs like a leopard can't change its spots and a zebra can't change its stripes, and who you are is who you are, and and then we describe people as being evil or as being good or as being this or as being that. And I think the thing about the deen, about Islam, is you're never pigeonholed. You are never that thing that is necessarily what everybody else thinks you are. There's always hope. There's always a chance for redemption and salvation, and even this sort of redemption and salvation can happen in a moment. Even a moment. It can take years. It can happen in a moment, because at the end, it's not about us, it's about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala determines when that moment's going to be, how it's going to be, where it's going to be, in what fashion, modality, so forth. And so really, our nufus, which as Sayyid Abdul Aziz mentioned, has a different context of how we say it, but let's say in the kind of the general context, the life force that makes who you are, always longs for its home. And home isn't here. Home is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not home. This is a temporary place. And when the Prophet ﷺ kind of indicates this, كن في الدنيا كمسافر أو كالغريب أو عابر سبيل. Be in this place like you're a traveler or passing through, because you actually are just passing through. And this form that we occupy now is the vehicle or the vessel by which or the receptacle by which we're passing through. And your true identity, if we're going to use that word, is not limited to this, and in fact, it will continue on past death. And so, as you were saying earlier, the you that's you, that makes you, is not limited to here. So it's not limited to here as we are right now, nor was it ever limited even to the day that you were born. But you were you before the day you were born. What Sidi mentioned about the day of Alastu bi Rabbikum, when Allah took all of the souls and said to them collectively, am I not your Lord? And we all said, Bala, which is affirming. We have witnessed that. Indeed, you are our Lord. And so, somewhere deep in our memory, it's still there. And so, oftentimes, the ulama of tazkiyah and tasawwuf and so forth, they talk about life's journey as a journey, like you're traveling from one place to the next. And certainly, we're traveling towards the final abode. But also in that interim, we're trying to travel to something else before we get there. And that's what they call a sayr wa suluk. So traveling and wayfaring towards what? Ilallah. Towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here we don't mean a physical type of union, that's impossible as we know. But it means a knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a more intimate knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be fully comprehended by human beings, and however much we know about Him will never be the limit. So if we say that the ma'loom غير متناهي, so namely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is infinite, then the knowledge of God is also infinite. So no one can claim that, no, I've reached, I've arrived, this is where it's at. I'm kind of okay with this, and here we are. No Arif Billah said, here we are, ever. And in fact, Imam al-Junayd, Sayyid al-Ta'ifa, when he was asked about people who said that, like, oh, we've arrived, here we are, he said they've arrived to hellfire. That's where they've arrived to. So the path of the journeyer, of the seeker, of the wayfarer, is one that continues until the last breath. وَاعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ. In other words, certainty when the veil is completely lifted and all is clear. وَبَصَرُكَ الْيَوْمَ حَدِيدٌ. And your eyesight or your piercing insight will be like steel, piercing. There'll be no mistake. And that's upon our death. Everything will be revealed. Everyone is going to be Arif Billah when they pass through to the next life, to the next abode. كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Every nafs, these nufus, is going to taste death. In other words, pass through the portal and they'll go on to something else. But yet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has things that He wants us to do while we're here. And life is a gift. And as any gift, it also becomes a trust and amana. And in order to properly be stewards over this trust, there are certain things that we endeavor to do that to the best of our ability. And amongst those things is to worship Allah and to be stewards over what Allah has asked us to be stewards over, which is this earth, this kawn, this khalq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has uniquely assigned that to the sons and daughters of Adam. And He assigned that first to Adam, our great-great-great-grandfather, when He said to the angels, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. I am putting upon the earth a steward, someone who will act on behalf of the divine commands and the divine prohibitions in this earth. And the angels were surprised. They said, قَالُوا تَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. They said, how can you put some entity that's going to sow corruption and spill blood, and we are the ones who are singing and hymning your praises for thousands of years before that? Allah says to them, قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know what you do not know. And then comes the illah, comes the reason. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ فَقَالَ أَنْبِئُونِي بِأَسْمَاءِ هَؤُلَاءِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ قَالُوا لَا عِلْمَ لَنَا إِلَّا مَا عَلَّمْتَنَا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. So then He taught Adam the names. And then He introduced them to the angels. They said, we don't know it. We only know what you tell us. They responded back to God. So the unique thing about Adam and about the sons and daughters of Adam is knowledge. We can know things. Yes, we came out of the wombs of our mothers not knowing anything. لا تعلمون شيئا, as the Quran says, you know nothing. But this sort of blank slate that comes out can then be elevated to the highest stratosphere of creation. Not by size, not by physical presence, but by meaning. So when Allah says that He has created the sons and daughters of Adam in His image, not an image that's a form, but an image that is formless, that is meaningful. So we have sama' and basar, and aql, and kalam. We have these things. We can hear, we can see, we can articulate, we can speak. These are things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also does, obviously in an infinitely different manner than human beings. But the linguistic similarity is not a mistake. It's there so we can appreciate what is divine and also appreciate what makes us also close to the divine. What makes us Rabbani, كونوا ربانيين. Right? The Quran says كونوا ربانيين, be divine like, be رباني. Right? تحقق بالعبودية. Be true slaves and servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وتتعلق بالربوبية, and be connected to the lordship, the sovereignty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the epitome of being a human being. That is the epitome of humanity. To know who you are, to know why you're here, and to have this intimate connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And every single human being ever created has the ability to do that, the potential to do that. But there are some things that sometimes get in the way. There are obstacles. When Sayyid Abdul Aziz was talking about النفس الأمارة بالسوء وما أبرئ نفسي إن النفس الأمارة بالسوء إلا من رحم ربي. This was in Surah Yusuf, and the ulama, they differ who actually said that. Was it Imrat al-Aziz, the wife of Aziz, Zulaykha, or was it Yusuf alayhi salam, the prophet? With varying interpretations about which one said that. Well, whatever the case may be, a prophet may have said that. Alhamdulillah. وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي. I cannot say my nafs is innocent. So in that verse, there's also an adab of how we deal with our nufus, which is we should never think that we're so perfect and so pious that perhaps we've moved beyond an nafs al-ammara bis-su. It will come to you in different ways. So that just do it, Sayyid Abdul Aziz was talking about, comes in different forms. It may be just do it, punch the Hajj tour guide who, gets you to Jeddah and there's no hotel. Like, just do it. Or it can be more subtle than that, depending upon how shaitan wants to influence you and use your nafs to get you on that road. So you may be actually a very pious person. You may be someone who has the whole Quran memorized. You may be someone who goes to Hajj every other year or something like that. But then shaitan gets to you from the door of ujb, of being contented and pleased with yourself. And so you go on that Hajj tour, and Imam Muzaffar is leading the Asr prayer, and you're like, his recitation is not really good at all. I should be the one leading that prayer here in the Arafah tent, and not him, because I recite much better, and I've memorized the Quran, and I have this, and I have that, and all these other things. That's also a nafs al-ammara bis-su. But it's very tricky. It's very devious in the way that it wants you to kind of follow it. So it kind of knows your triggers, to use like a modern word. It knows exactly how to trigger you and then get you to act upon that trigger. So you might say, well, how do I overcome that? How is that even possible? It is possible. And what we've learned from our teachers and our sheikhs is that you never really get rid of that voice that comes to you and says, just do it, but you learn to recognize it. And you learn to reject the message. If we look to the other verse, يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. Who's speaking here? يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة. That's an address from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, speaking to the nafs. The nafs al-ammara is not worthy of being spoken to. So when it said Yusuf or Zulaykha said it, they talked about themselves. وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ أَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. Here the address is coming directly to the nafs. But not just any nafs, النَّفْسُ الْمُطْمَئِنَّةِ. Right? The tranquil nafs, the serene nafs. يَا أَيَّتُهَا النَّفْسُ الْمُطْمَئِنَّةِ ارْجِعِي إِلَى رَبِّكِ. Go back to your Lord. So going back to your Lord means that one of the attributes of the nafs al-mutma'inna, that it is tawwaba, ayiba. It's always going back to its Lord. You can go back to your Lord after a mistake, as people commonly think tawbah is, and you can also go back to your Lord not because of a mistake, raghbatan, because you desire to go back to your Lord. So sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you things, and then it makes you want to go back even more. وَلَئِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. And if you are grateful, I will increase you. Increase you how? Increase you in gratitude. Increase you in longing for going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. And those who struggle for us, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will guide them to the paths, to the ways. So there's a path of ihsan, and the path of iman, and the path of Islam, and the path of taqwa, and the path of siyam, and the path of sadaqah, and the path of zakat and charity. There's so many subul. There's so many good paths to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you exert that effort, لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا, then Allah will bring you to that. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about all these different categories of believers. He talks about the muhsinun and the muttaqun and the mu'minun and the muslimun, zahidun al-abidun. These are all layers of light. These are all layers of, it adds to the texture of what a believer has the potential to be. And every single person can avail themselves of this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it possible for every single person. So when he's directly addressing the nafs here, this is another voice. So that voice that you hear of contentment, of, in essence, going outside of yourself. Right? The more like the you of something is involved in something, the more the ego of it, the more poisonous it can become. But if you ask creative people or people who kind of get in a particular, let's say, zone, they feel like they're not doing anything. They feel like they're mere witnesses to it, and that someone else is doing it for them. So the idea then is to become sort of this receptacle for the divine voice, to be able to hear it. And the divine voice is always there. One of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is huwa al-mutakallim, kalam. This is what we learned in aqidah or theology. And his speech did not end when he revealed the Quran. Because if we say his speech ended when he revealed the Quran, then what is Allah now? Silent? That's impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's always communicating to us. How does he communicate to us? The Quran has been revealed. What other revelation is there? There's other revelation. All this. That's why they said Kitabullah al-Mastur, the book of Allah between the lines, which is the Quran, wa Kitabullah al-Manzur, and the book of Allah that is everything around you. Everything is speaking, everything is hymning the praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُ. And there is nothing except that it sings the praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except you don't understand it. That is, most people don't understand it. But some people understand it. Some people can hear the praise of the trees and of the animals and of the bugs and of the insects and of the waves and the ocean, of the moon and the sun. These are all things that are speaking to us and communicating with us via the divine voice. But we have to stop and look. We have to take a step back. The great Imam Ibn Ata'illah Secondary, one of the great Sufi sheikhs and murabbis and ulama of tazkiyah, he said in one of the hikam, إِنَّمَا حَجَبَكَ عَنْدَكَ اللَّهِ شِدَّةُ قُرْبِهِ مِنْكَ. The thing that has veiled you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the severity of his proximity. He's so close to you, can't see him. Right? Like if you focus on something, I'm looking at this thing, I can't see it. So I take a step back because it's so close. Allah is so close that we can't even see him. He has so much light that we are so much surrounded by it. We've never seen darkness, so we can't perceive the darkness from the light. Just like the bat that can't see during the day, but it can see at night. The light is too much during the day. So we have the light of wujud. We don't know the darkness of al-adam. Light of wujud means the light of existence. We don't know the darkness of non-existence because we've never seen it. We've never been exposed to it. But we are given metaphors and parables. Day and night, winter, spring, life and death, growth and death. If you came here in the dead of winter in Nottingham when all of the green is no longer there and you're like an alien from another planet and you landed in the middle of January or February, could you even imagine that it would look like this in a few months? Impossible. But we got so used to it. We're so accustomed to it that we don't take a second to think about it. So all of that is part of Allah's plan and His tartib and all of the signs that He keeps sending our way. And once you start listening to those, then you're no longer listening to a nafs al-ammara bis-su, which just wants you to satiate yourself and fulfill your lowest common desires and passions, which everybody has. But now you begin to hear something different. Now you can hear that voice that's speaking to a nafs al-mutma'innah, that says to you, irji'i ila rabbiki. How should I return to my Lord?
Allah.
It tells us, radiyatan mardiyah. What's radiyah? You are pleased and contented with Allah. Okay, that's good. What's the other one? Mardiyah. That's actually even better. It means Allah is pleased and contented with you. So some of them who separated the nufus into 7 instead of the 3, they said you have a nafs al-amara bis-su' is the lowest nafs. And then you have a nafs al-lawwama, the blaming nafs that goes back and forth, vacillates between good and evil. Then you have something called the nafs al-mulhama, the inspired nafs. Then the 4th one, the nafs al-mutma'innah that we just mentioned, the serene nafs. Then you have a nafs al-radiyah, the nafs that is contented with Allah. وَالنَّفْسُ الْمَرْضِيَّةِ, the nafs that Allah is contented with. And then finally the 7th one, النَّفْسُ الْكَامِلَةِ, the perfect nafs. Starting from nafs number 3, it's awliya. Starting from nafs number 3, النَّفْسَ الْمُلْهَمَةِ, هذه بداية الولاية. So if you're a nafs al-amara bis-su' or a nafs al-lawwama, you're a believer. أنت من الأبرار ومن الصالحين لعلك. But a nafs al-mulhama, the inspired one, that's a whole other category. So you could think of like your daily nafs gauge or monitor. If you're nafs al-amara bis-su', if you're nafs al-lawwama, sine wave. If you're nafs al-mulhama, no, it's gradually going like this. Then radiyah, madiyah, kamila. This gives us hope. This is where the believer can be. You know, the modern world wants to tell you all at the nafs al-amara bis-su'. You can't leave that. One of my teachers, he said Freud was really good at describing the lower nafs, the nafs al-amara bis-su'. But he had no clue about the other nufus because he's never seen it. So he can't imagine it. He's never met a wali. He's never met one of the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we can't imagine what that looks like. People who are sick and poisoned inside, they think everybody's like that. Because they can't imagine a scenario where someone is not like that. But if you ever sat with someone of Ahlillah, someone of the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it opens you up. It gives you hope and imagination. You need imagination to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. تعبد الله كأنك ترى. That's what ihsan is. Worship Allah as if you see Him. Well, I can't see Him, so how do I do that? Well, can you imagine it? How do I imagine it? Like the same way the Sahaba imagined it. Some of them said, ما رأيت شيء إلا رأيت الله قبله أو بعده أو معه أو فيه. Some of them said, I did not see anything except I saw Allah before it, because I know the existence of that thing is not independent and only Allah could have made it exist. And someone said, or I saw that Allah after it, because I know that thing is temporary and it's going to go away, but Allah will remain. كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك. Everything is going to be diminishing and destroyed, but what remains is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then ma'hu, except I saw that Allah with that thing, because that thing can't possibly sustain itself. هو الحي القيوم. So the qayyum is the one who makes everything else qa'im. He gives life and sustenance to everything else. They cannot independently exist. So if Allah huwa al-awwal wal-akhir wal-zahir wal-batin, if He is the first without beginning, the last without ending, al-zahir, the manifest, al-batin, the concealed, wa ala kulli shay'in qadir, and He has power over all things, what's left? There's only 2 categories in the whole thing that we're living here. Allah wa ma siwa Allah. There's only Allah and everything besides Allah. Wa ma siwa Allah af'aluhu.
Allah.
And that which is besides Allah are Allah's acts. When you realize this, then you realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala huwa al-hamid wal-mahbub wal-shakir wal-mashkur wal-muhib wal-mahbub. Ultimately, He is the one who praises Himself. Is that what the Prophet ﷺ said? لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. We can't properly show gratitude towards you. You are to be praised and shown gratitude as you have done for yourself. And so when you say radiya mardiya, mardiya is higher because you realize you could not be radi except Allah is radi upon you. You cannot be contented with God unless God is contented with you. فاذكروني أذكركم. Remember me, I remember you. وذكره ذكرنا له عين ذكره لنا. Our remembrance of him is actually his remembrance of us. Because his remembrance of us preceded our existence. Right? Allah is Qadim. Allah is eternal. Everything that he knows and does and everything was before we all existed. So he sought us before we sought him. He loved us before we loved him. He praised himself and us before we praised him. So once you come to that realization, then you hear the divine voice. It's always there. But sometimes it comes and you don't hear it because it's busy in here. With dunya and how am I going to make money and, you know, where am I going to get the petrol from and am I going to get the promotion at work and, you know, did I get enough status likes on my Facebook status, enough Instagram followers and all this stuff. Busy. So it's too busy. It's a lot of noise. You won't hear the divine voice. That's why there's certain types of acts of worship that are meant to be done when it's quiet. And it's best to be done when it's quiet. The middle of the night, the last third of the night, the time between Fajr and sunrise. Sometime during Jum'ah, the dua is mustajab. Ramadan is a quieting of the nafs. That's the whole thing. That's what it's all about. Because when you're fasting, you're quieting the nafs. You're kind of putting it at bay. And then you can listen. Why do we fast during the day? And we pray and listen to the Quran at night. And then the Quran in the evening is called the Taraweeh. Why is it called the Taraweeh? Min al-Raha. Min al-Aryahiyya. It's ease. Arihna biha ya Bilal. Give us ease. Give us ease in listening to the meanings of the Quran because now you're in a position to actually listen. You can hear it because you've quieted the nafs. And the nafs takes a lot of work to quiet it. That's why Ramadan is not 1 day or 2 days or 3 days or a week. It's 30 days. And 30 days is considered the minimum to break a bad habit and form a good new habit. 30 to 40 days. It's a very significant number. That's why Ramadan is 30 days. So any time you want to change something in your life and you want to make it permanent, you got to give it 30 days. And any thing you want to accomplish in your life, don't give it more than 2 decades, 23 years. That was the mission of the Prophet ﷺ. There's no 30-year plan and 40-year plan. Maximum 23 years. Because that was the mission of the Prophet ﷺ. And that means you can accomplish those things in less than that. But don't have a plan. Yeah, 30 years from now I'll make Hajj. Who's going to live 30 years from now? You make Hajj now when you have the chance. You make the changes now in your life when you have the chance. You do the things you need to do right now when you have the chance. Don't wait for your faragh, as Ibn Ata'illah Sakandari says. Don't wait till you're free from your busyness, because you will never be free from your busyness. It's time to make time for the things that are more important than your busyness. Once you do that, you will hear all sorts of things. Once you become a person of dhikr, a person of good suhbah with good people and people of ahlillah, things will change for you. You'll be hearing many, many things, many beautiful things, many contenting things. May Allah make us of those people, inshallah. So I think I've exceeded my 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop here, inshallah.
So I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, what are the signs that you are content with Allah and Allah is content with you? And secondly, you both have the opportunity to sit with some big shuyukh and scholars like Habib Ahmed Bashir Haddad, Shaykh Muhammad. What qualities did you see in them, or what practices did you see in them, where they were basically grappling enough, they've been trying to grapple enough bit, which you can share, so we have an idea of the practices or the lengths that people have gone through in order to fight enough.
There was one of the Moroccan ulama was asked a similar question. He said, what's a wali? What is the saint? What is this word that we talk about? And he said, simply, it's when the nafs When it's in the shade, it doesn't want to sit in the sun. When it's in the sun, it doesn't want to sit in the shade. That's it. When you're in the shade, you're okay. When you're in the sun, you're okay. And those people whose nafs has that, they are so happy.
I don't know, that sounds like a good answer to me. But, one of the things I've noticed when I've been around these people is somehow I feel like, or I think I feel like the way that they feel when I'm around them. So this happiness and this happy in the sun, happy in the shade, I feel that too. So whether we're, out somewhere, we're, just eating on the floor and basic things, we're really happy. Or the next day it's a 5-star buffet in some hotel, it's fine too. Or we're doing this or we're doing that, just, being in the presence of those people because that's where they're at. Their companion is not really any one person, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from what I understand. And if Allah is your companion, how could you ever feel lonely or alienated or sad or those sorts of things? And then, the thing is, the strange thing is they don't really see themselves like that either. I used to think they're just being modest. And I actually think they don't see it themselves. They're just kind of, okay, this is where Allah takes me. They're not thinking about ahwal or maqam or, all of these things that we talk silly about. They're beyond that. They're just with God. That's it.
See, he's a willy.
Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah.
Can I tell a story? That's all I do, really. A turning point in my life was, I don't know if people know, but I have German ancestry, and my ex-wives, they call ex-wives for a reason, is they say, "He's such a German." Really racist comments, but it has a meaning, and that's why they're my ex-wives rather than, I won't go there. But there's a turning point. I was in London and quite young, and the brother was asking, he was asking about, what about these sheikhs that you've met? There was one of these sheikhs, his name is Sheikh Muhammad Bashu'aib, if anyone has ever met him. But there's one thing that he said, I've been with him for many years, but one thing, we took a train. Train's going to go to Preston, 9:15. 9:10, as any German would be, I'm standing on the platform waiting for my 2 African friends, Sheikh Mohammed and Sheikh Mohammed. 9:20, they both turn up, and this German, 100% nafs al-amara bis-su. And then Sheikh Mohammed looks at me and he said, "The barakah's on the next train. The blessing's on the next train." That was it. And I thought, wow. And it changed my life. I'm still a bit OCD. I've still got German genes, but I remember that if you can just, when you've missed a train, just remember that story. The barakah's on the next train. And these people, these are really people who are at peace with themselves and with the world. And I just looked at them and I thought, I just want to be like one of them. I haven't succeeded, but I'm trying. So it's that, yeah, it's all right. The barakah's on the next train. It's okay. That's what the nafs needs. When you can just say, it's okay. Barakah's on the next train.
Sister.
Having a regular field helps most success, but because maybe of something you did with bad actions, you lose that will, and then there becomes a decline in your state, and getting back up there again, it happens repeatedly, and that's never get the state that makes any progress.
So if I understand the question correctly, you're asking that sometimes you can be in a good state, make progress, and then feel you have a setback and so forth. I don't know how useful it is to look at it that way, in terms of setback and progress, and here I was and now here I am. Sometimes what we interpret to be a lack of progress or a setback or something like that could be something entirely different. It could be, as we said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always communicating with us. And sometimes there's a lesson in what we perceive to be setbacks. And I spoke about this the other day. There's a kind of a different way to look at it as qabd and bast, some of them talked about. So there can be a constriction or there can be an expansion. And usually a constriction will happen when we feel something like that or we made a mistake and something of this sort. And then an expansion happens when, we're in the company of good people, or we went to Hajj or went to Umrah, and we feel like, wow, this is amazing, and I wish it could be like this all the time. But the thing is, it's never going to be like that all the time. Allah yaqbidu wa yabsutu wa ilayhi turja'un. Allah constricts and He expands, but you are always returning to Him. So just like we worship Allah in the day and when it's sunny, we also worship when it's night or when it's rainy. So it's not the feeling or the spiritual high that we should be seeking, but we should be seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. And sometimes, what they call is salb, removing something of the pleasure of ibadah, it's to teach us a lesson, so that we may go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the idea, I think, is to have consistent routines, consistent spiritual routines. If, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't leave the 5 prayers up to us to pray them whenever we felt like it. He wants us to establish consistent spiritual routines, and the very bare minimum is the 5 prayers. But those 5 prayers, the way that they're spaced throughout the day, also there's a lesson in that, in the sense that we should be organizing our times and our activities and our litanies and our awrad around those 5 prayers. So you have things after Fajr and things before Maghrib and things before Dhuhr and after Dhuhr. There's a reason that it works that way. It's because we put barakah and blessing in the time. And some of them said that the prayer itself is like the zakat of your time. So just like zakat you pay on your wealth, because there might be some, dubious sources of income and you're purifying your wealth. Well, there might be dubious things you're doing with your time. And then the prayer, in essence, is a purification of how you spend your time. So my advice to most people would be consistent and even small spiritual routines that you do at the same time every day. And I would begin with the morning, what you do when you wake up and after Fajr, and if most people usually not have to work until then, use that time, and it's mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, al-ghadat, that time between Fajr and sunrise, and also the night time, your routine before you go to sleep. It's best to get into a routine of closing off all devices and all distractions at least an hour before sleep. It's also good for your circadian rhythm and for sleeping, and also for your spiritual state. Because whatever you're thinking about before you go to sleep, you might actually still be in your subconscious, and then you dream about it. And you kind of rob yourself of true dreams, and dreams that can come from the divine and give you, perspective and insight into many, many things. And a lot of these things are not easy to accomplish on one's own. That's why you need good sohbah, you need teachers, you need mentors, you need guides. We need these sort of people in our lives, because the nafs is very tricky, and it's always going to trick you. And I talked about, just say this one thing that I mentioned the other day, giving a perspective about how tricky the nafs could be. So we all know or many of us know the hadith in Bukhari about the serial killer who killed 99 people. And he wanted to make tawbah, redemption. This was in the time of Bani Israel. And so he asked the people, and they said, well, you go ask the abid. Go ask the worshipful person who's up in the cave and has been worshiping for decades. Nobody sees him. He's always in khalwa. He has all this fasting and praying and so forth. He's really amazing. Go ask him. So the man went and asked the worshipful servant, Wahid. I wish these things we didn't have to use them, but anyway. So he asked the worshipful servant, and he said, oh, you've killed 99 people? How could a person like you possibly find redemption? It's too late. You're destined for hellfire.
We'll use this one. I'll just play it. Sorry about that.
It's the feedback from both. Turn it off. There you go. It's the feedback. Is that better? Okay. So this very worshipful person told him, no, you have no redemption, there's no tawbah for you, and so that serial killer wound up killing him too. So now it's 100. But he was still remorseful. So he went and asked again. They said, well, maybe you should go to the alim. In other words, al-arif billah, someone who really knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He may not have as much worship as the previous person, but he really understands. Because the previous person looked at this person, the serial killer, from the perspective of his nafs. How could he possibly come and be the same as me and reach my heights? So he had what we call ru'yat al-hal. He saw his state as being pious. So he could not imagine that someone as impious as this person could possibly come and be the same category as him. So he told them, there's no redemption for you. So when he goes to the Arif Billah, he tells them, of course there's redemption for you. The door is always open. But you need to change something about your life. So he didn't only tell them that you have a chance, but he said, whatever you're doing now, it has to be different. What did Einstein say? If you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect the same result, and expect a different result, that's insanity. So you need to change your life. So he said, leave this town, leave this sohbah, leave this company, leave this place where you're in and go to another town, the next town over, where you're going to make a fresh start. People don't know you. You have a new beginning, so forth. And that's what he did. He didn't make it there. He died along the way. And in the hadith, it's narrated that the angels were divided about what they should do with him. Should they take him to paradise or should they take him to hellfire? So they said, let's measure the distance physically. And they found that he got closer to the newer town by a hair. And so they took him off to paradise. And he did not do one really good pious act, except his heart turned towards God. And that's really the whole thing. The heart turning towards Allah. And that's, the Shaykh, they say, sidq tawajjuh. The sincerity of turning towards Allah is the whole thing. And if you have that, then, that's going to be the thing that's going to cut through all of the temptations and the passions and the desire and the nufus and the difficult things you may have, as long as your compass is turned towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So spiritual routines, good company, reminders, and the sine wave, inshallah, will be something a little bit more productive than that after. So now.
How would you describe a person's nuts and what practical self-help
Sounds like your question.
You have a mic.
That's right up your alley.
There's no mic. Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think, if I heard correctly, you were asking about how do those particular characteristics, those states of depression, anxiety, relate to the nafs? Have I understood it correctly?
And in children, specifically.
How you describe someone's nuts if they were in a state of anxiety, self-harm, experiencing these symptoms, what actually they fall into. If you speak about the nuts in terms of those from ourselves, but what about the opposite? If someone's in no food and they isolate themselves, how do they not affect you that way? And what can they do to come out from this behavior?
Okay, if we go back to the line of poetry, and just to follow what Shaykh Walead had just said there, we use several words. And the reason why I was interested in trying to say that first was because sometimes the words are interchangeable and sometimes they have very specific meaning. And what Shaykh Walead just explained is a very, very beautiful description of the word qalb. The word qalb is called that which turns within you. And this person at the end of his life, he turned towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And our hope is that our heart will be in that positive state of turning before we die, which is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us this dua, Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qalbi ala dinik. O you who turns the hearts this way and that way, make it firm on the way that you want us, the deen, your deen, ala dinik. So here the word heart is an appropriate way. Now, how's it used in the Quran? It says, fi qulubihim marad, فزادهم الله مرضا. And the heart has illness, and Allah increases those illnesses in certain states. That person who'd killed 99 people, in the end, his heart was okay when he died. And anybody that comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like that has been described, مَنْ أَتَى بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ, a sound heart. So I'd like to just change the question slightly, if you permit me, to say not what is the state of their nafs, but what is their state of their heart. Going back to that statement, they're all the same thing, but there's something going on in there. But there's slightly different shades of meaning. And the reason why I want to change the question slightly is because if I use the word heart, it will make more sense to everybody. Because you know what I'm talking about. Because the heart in the Arabic language is described as the seat of your emotions. So those emotions are the thing that drives your changes. Anger. Going back to what Rumi said, the ego is hell. And hell is a dragon. He's not just describing the nafs al-amaratu bisu, which in this theological way, he's talking about the emotions of going, it burns you up. Anger. Anger burns you up. What does it do? It makes your heart unhealthy because you're driven by anger. And I'm not sure whether you're referring specifically to children, because I think, or whether Walead was just asking me to answer about children. But that's my experience. I don't work with big people, and I don't really like big people. I like small people and children. Sorry, apologies to anybody that's adult. Kids, I love you. And my experiences with kids, and I know kids who are angry. And that's when I kind of developed what I do. I work with kids that have got problems, all the sort of things that you were talking about, because I know those sicknesses. And my job in working with them is to try and help them with their emotions. Now you can transfer this to adults, so those people that can do the transference, just do it. So what do I mean by this is understanding how do you make, or how do you help the person, how do you help yourself to be healthy, to have those healthy emotions. And the things that you described are all unhealthy emotions. So the easy question is, how do you describe them? Unhealthy. But he's not going to answer anyway, because the follow-up to that is, I know you're going to ask, well, how do you make them healthier? And the way that you make them healthier are the sort of things that Shaykh Walead has touched on very briefly. And I'd just like to go back just so I can recap on some of the things he said. One of the things he said was, you don't belong here. Your heart doesn't belong here. The Prophet ﷺ says, Kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharib, aw abir as-sabil. Be in this world as if you don't belong here. You're just traveling through. What does that mean? It means your heart, your emotions should be attached to somewhere else. What is this somewhere else? The next world. You need to free yourself of this world. Another thing he mentioned two words which are really important, which I need to think about a little bit. One, he said, we call the Taraweeh prayer the Taraweeh because it's that which brings you peace, which is connected to the word ruh, spirit. So you find your peace if you do the Taraweeh properly, in the peace of that. And he also made a quote, it was sort of a passing quote, which is why I want to expand on that or just remind myself. He said, Arihna biha ya Bilal. Arihna biha ya Bilal, what he meant, call the adhan. That's what he meant, wasn't it? Arihna biha ya. He didn't say, Bilal, call the adhan. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Arihna biha ya Bilal. Make us come to feel peace. Oh, Bilal. What did Bilal do? He stood up, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. He said, Allah is bigger than all of that rubbish that's going through your head. All of that anxiety, all of that stuff that's making you depressed, that's pulling you down. Allah's bigger than that. That's why he's arihna. And then Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. What does that mean? He also said, there was a day where you said, Bala, shahidna. What was that day? Oh yeah, when Allah said to you, Alasta bi Rabbik, am I not your Lord? And you all said, shahidna. You need to remember that day. Bilal said, yeah, Ashhadu an, I know what that's about. And then he says, Hayya ala salah, come to the salah. Yeah, the salah is where I find that peace. Hayya ala falah, come to success. The beauty of this word falah, falah is actually one of the names of the Jannah. You call it the Jannah, Firdaus. It has loads of names. One of them is falah. And this word is used particularly because when Bilal, the Mu'adhin says, Hayya al falah, he's saying, come to your homeland. You know, I like coming to Nottingham. It's where I was born. It's where my mum's buried. It's where my dad's buried. I feel a degree of peace, but it's not really home. It's not really home. And anyone that knows, you don't really ever feel at home anywhere. And the reason why you don't feel at home anywhere is because you don't belong here. Hayya al falah means come to where you really belong, which is the Jannah. It's the Jannah. So here, all of these things are the things which will make your heart start to come to peace. So going back to the question, easy answer, sick. You ask, what is it? How do you describe it? You mean sick. But I know you want more than that. How do you get it better? You need to go to the actions of the deen. And it's not just actions. What is the essence of the different things? What's the essence of the adhan? What's the essence of that black stone? That black stone is where you remember that contract, Alastu bi Rabbikum. And when you go there, there's no reason why you kiss the black stone except that the Prophet ﷺ kissed the black stone and he was asked why. He says, this is Yadullah, or Yadur Rahman al-Yumna. This is Allah's right hand on the earth. And in it contains the covenant of Alastu bi Rabbikum. You don't know what the Hajj is about until you get there. And my uncle, I'll just tell you a little bit more about him. The reason why nobody liked him on that Hajj was because he used to drink. And I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know who he was. And people complained why he was so alone was because he was a bad guy. And I thought, bad guy, I thought. He was the perfect person as far as I was concerned because he knew his Lord. How did his heart turn? He found peace. And he died with a healthy heart. So one of the ways you get out of it is to ask, Ya muqallib al-qulub thabbit qalbi ala dinik. But also you need to do, the question was about wird. Wird means to do something regularly. You need to just keep working on dealing with what's going on with your emotions. And when Shaykh has talked about guides, a real guide is somebody helps you to deal with those emotions. And whether that's Shaykh, or whether it's a teacher, or whether it's the Quran, you'll find that peace once it connects to the sicknesses of the heart. And the way to understand those anxieties, etc., is to go to the scholars of the heart, which is what the Shaykh has mentioned. And I'll just give you one final example. You mentioned anxiety first. Of all the things you mentioned, anxiety, and I love that. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he talked about anxiety before Freud, before any of these psychologists. What did he say? He said the phrase "La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah" is a da'in, is a cure to 99 illnesses. Adnaha alham. Adnaha alham. The lowest of which is anxiety. The word adna means closest. Anxiety is the first sickness of the heart. But likewise, it's the commonest. Adnaha. Everybody suffers from anxiety. And that's why adnaha also implies that others are built on it. 99 anxiety, 99 illnesses, what do we talk about? I'll tell you what I'm talking about. Angina, ADHD, all of these other things that go on in your heart, in your state, the lowest of which is anxiety. And if you can deal with the anxiety, you can deal with everything else, inshallah. So the thing is to focus on what is the cure. But saying La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-aliyyul azim will help. But to understand it is really what's going to help. Can I? Just to add to that, there's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ was with Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajhah. This is somebody he loves. And this is the style of, he said to Sayyidina Ali, should I teach you what you should say if you fall into quicksand? This is in the desert of Al-Madinah. This is a desert, or an oasis within the desert. Quicksand was not a big problem. It's not something that you really have a problem with, generally speaking. He's not talking about quicksand. He said, and Sayyidina Ali says, please, Ya Rasulullah, teach me. What did he answer? He said, إِذَا وَقَعْتَ فِي الْوَرْطَةِ. If you fall into quicksand, you know what quicksand is? What's quicksand? Help me. It pulls you down. And the more you move, what happens? The more you sink. He ain't talking about quicksand. He's talking about the sicknesses of the heart. The things in your life that if you don't deal with them, or you try to deal with them yourself with your own nafs, you sink. How do you get rid of that? He says, إِذَا وَقَعْتَ فِي الْوَرْطَةِ. If you fall into the warta, if you fall into this state, قُل, say, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. What does this mean? In the name of the most merciful, the intensely merciful, the source of all mercy. I ain't got a clue what it translates, but you know what I'm talking about. I have no power. I have no ability except Allah. Just pull me out of this mess. So the answer to all of those illnesses is to get to the root of what the illness is and to start to help to find the cure. And the cure is there. And one of the cures of anxiety is to recognize you can't deal with it. And once you recognize you can't deal with it, and he can deal with it, you're empowering your spirit, your heart. You're starting to heal. Plus there's things then which the doctor, so to speak, can help you with those anxieties. And one of them is to identify the triggers. And another is to identify how do you deal with the triggers. And this isn't some weird pseudo-psychology. This is from the Sunnah. Don't go down the road that makes you scared. Simple. If there's something that's going to upset you down this road, go down that road. Simple. This is the prophetic advice. Find the ways of avoiding the triggers of your anxiety and all of your illnesses. And one of them, Shaykh has also said so many powerful things. One of the things he said was just switch off your phone before you go to bed. Why? Because it messes with your head. That's the answer to having a healthy heart, is to learn those things and to keep practicing them. So I just repeat what the Shaykh has said.
So that's a beautiful question, and it ties into what we just had sent in online and the question for Shaykh Walead, from Shaykh Aziz, which is you talked about the different degrees of the soul and the NAFS. Touching upon what Shaykh Aziz advised about the entities, can you also give us any other practical advice and things to do so that we can raise our levels and grow the various degrees of the soul and the NAFS, inshallah? That's what advice would you give us?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The ulama say that there are 4 basic components to kind of improve one's self, I suppose, and get to a better state. And they call this process in the beginning takhliya. So it's kind of the removal of distraction and vice and so forth. And it's kind of like the parable in the absence of light, there's darkness. So it's kind of removing the things that obscure the light from coming through. What I spoke about earlier about the divine voice and hearing. And the things that prevent that are really intrinsic to ourselves and not really external, but the things that we could manage to some degree on our own and to some degree also within a community and the Sohbah. And as Shaykh Aziz had a teacher and a guide or the Quran. So these things can be done and we've seen them done. And that's really the basis of the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, is that he brought this for us so that we can get to that place. So I never think it's insurmountable or impossible, or you have such an intractable problem that no one can fix it. Allah can fix it, as he said. Don't put the onus upon yourself. Put it upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so they said our relationship with how and what we eat is very important. What we say, how often we say it, the company that we keep, and the way that we manage our sleep and our prayer and night vigils and our afkar. Those 4 things. And if you look at each one of them, I would say, you know how they talk about today about like lifestyle factors and things like that make your life better. They include in it sleep and diet and things like that. Well, certainly there's a connection between the physical and the spiritual. So it's very important that even we look at those links. When we are fed a steady diet of, even physically, of things that are sugary, that are produced in a food science lab by Nestle or some other company, or and not taken from the earth and taken from what is tayyib. The Quran tells us, Ya ayyuha rusul kulu min tayyibati wa amalu salihan. And telling the messengers, eat from the tayyib, from the good, and you will do good deeds. So that which is tayyib, that which is wholesome, that which is pure. We don't want to put anything into our bodies that is not of that. And many of these artificial sweeteners and other additives that are put into food, we don't even know the extent of how much harm that they're doing. But certainly they're doing quite a bit of harm. And the manner by which we eat, how often. Prophet ﷺ had a very simple rule for his approach to how he deals with food. And if you do it, you don't need a doctor, basically. And he said, نحن قوم لا نأكل حتى نجوع ولا نقوم حتى نشبع. We are a people, we don't eat unless we're hungry. And then when we eat, we don't eat till we're full. That's it. That's all you have to do. Eat when you're hungry. And when you start to eat, don't get to the point where you're completely full. This is what the ulama call qillat al-ta'am. Looking at how much you're taking in, because food has a direct impact not just on your physical state, but also your spiritual state. And nowadays, with people with so many issues with body image and and obviously the social media kind of exacerbates the situation. People are looking at these very unrealistic kind of images of body that they think they should have, and the societal pressure that's put there. I think that's a big factor, not in just in anxiety, but people's kind of way of looking at themselves and their confidence and so forth. So I think that's very important. What we say, how we say it. من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. This is the sunnah. Whoever believes in Allah on the last day, let them say something good or be silent. Remain silent. And the silencing of the tongue is directly related to the silencing of the heart. The more that you start receiving from Allah, the more you feel like you have less to say. Because the more you'll be aware of what you are saying, and then you don't want to say things that don't come from that divine, pure place. So you don't want to say anything frivolous. And then the company that you keep, right? The sohbah, man jalasa jalis, right? Whoever you sit with, you're going to take some of what they have. Look to who your jalis is. The Prophet ﷺ said about from the Hadith Qudsi that Allah says, "Ana jalisu man dhakarani." I am the sitting companion of the one who remembers me. So that brings us to the zikr and the awrad and how we spend, the parts of the night where we're alone. What do you do in your alone time? Are we just automatically go to the phone? Or do we have an impulse to read something of the Quran, to do something of the zikr? I have a belief that if you spend part of the night in in dhikr or in tilawa or in Quran or tahajjud or praying the night, you will need less sleep. Because part of what happens with sleep is it gives a rest for the ruh, for the soul. So not just a physical rest, but also a rest for the soul. And I know many men of God, and I'm sure men of God, they don't sleep more than 4 to 6 hours a night. But they spend the other 2 hours in dhikr, in tahajjud, in qiyam. So they do the 8 hours that the doctors recommend, but not in the way that they think. So there's this ariyahiyya and raha for the ruh, for the soul, in another way. And if you don't believe me, try it. See how it works out. Yeah, and those are just a few things I think that we can focus on. I'm sure Sayyid Abdul Aziz has something more to say about that. There's a sister raising her hand.
Salam.
How does one become up with yourself when you feel guilty that you don't do enough? For example, you mentioned earlier about being consistent with certain values and certain things in the house. When you're content to do something, sometimes when you please yourself, gets in the way, you kind of like stop doing that thing, feel guilty, you don't do enough, get attention, how good you don't get up. It's like, you don't get this guilty feeling like you're never doing enough. Even when you do have a good day and you do enough ibadah, you still feel like it changed, like, oh, I could have done this and I could have done that. Like, you're never satisfied with your ibadah itself. So that's my question, is like, how can you be at peace with yourself? You're never really at peace with yourself? You always feel guilty with not doing enough. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So the question, I'll repeat it for people who are watching. The feeling that some might get, like you never do enough in your ibadah and your worship, and you miss this thing or that other thing, and then how can you be this nafs al-mutma'inna if you can never be contented with your soul in that way? And the nafs is not mutma'inna bi nafsiha, and nafs mutma'inna billah. The nafs is not contented with itself and what it does. It's contented with God, with Allah. That's the whole thing. And the goal is not to be contented with our a'mal, with the deeds that we do. Sometimes the deeds can even be a hijab. Sometimes they could be a veil if we have this self-perception of the deeds. We say, my deeds, and I prayed this much, and I give this much zakah, and I give this much money to the masjid, and you have this, what they call this al-illah al-khafiyya, the hidden defect of our deeds is ru'yat al-amal, is seeing the deeds that we do. And from amongst the signs of acceptance of amal is not to see them, is not to have this sort of consciousness about them. It's like you do them and then you move on to the next thing. And you're not thinking about it the next day or even the next moment. And if someone reminds you of, oh, you did this, this, and this, oh really? Okay, I don't remember, but fine. Because you're not living with the deeds, you're living with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنَّ الْقُلُوبُ. Right? So by the remembrance of Allah, then you find the tuma'nina. Then you find this peace and serenity, because that which reminds you of Allah, because your heart, as we said, is not for this dunya, it's for the next life, will give you contentment. And that which reminds you of the dunya and everything in it will make you feel unsettled. The dunya is always unsettling because you're never going to be settled here. That's the whole point. No matter how much money you have, no matter how many accolades and awards you receive, no matter what you achieve in terms of success defined in the dunya, no one will ever be satisfied. And that's why people who even achieve those heights and things, they're still not satisfied, because they're trying to plug a hole in their heart that's not meant for dunya, it's meant for Allah. And it's never going to be rectified by anything in the dunya. That's why people who have almost nothing, but somehow they're so content with Allah. Myself and Sayyid Abdul Aziz, we've traveled to East Africa together, and I've also traveled to West Africa. Usually when we think of Africa, we think, oh, these people are so poor and poverty and so forth. Wallahi, I've not seen people more content with so little.
No.
It's like in their DNA, it's like in their fitrah. They're not thinking about what sort of life Kim Kardashian has or whoever. It's not on their radar. That's all they have. And they want to share it with you. Like it's like, oh no, you have like okay, yeah. Whatever they have, they want to share with you. Like there's this raha and there's this ease about them because their hearts are connected with Allah and they're not connected with other things. So our nufus, we're not going to be contented with them. In fact, we're not supposed to be contented with them. We're not even supposed to see it. We're supposed to see Allah.
Can I just check I understood something? When he said about تطمئن بالنفوس and تطمئن بالله, being at peace with Allah and being at peace with yourself, relating directly to the question, you gave the example of you don't feel satisfied with yourself, and you said one of the examples you gave was not getting up for tahajjud. Actually, tahajjud is a gift. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has angels whose role it is to wake people up for tahajjud. And so when you wake up for tahajjud, you recognize, yeah, I was chosen. Allah chose me, yeah. It's not, I got up for tahajjud. See how pious? It's Allah chose me. If you take that attitude, then the next day Allah doesn't choose you. How do you feel? Allah didn't choose me. It's not satisfaction with yourself or not with yourself. تطمئن بالنفوس. Because if it's about the action, yeah, I did tahajjud. I did this. It's still, just do it. Just do it. It's still the nafs al-amara. But the mutma'inna is, I didn't get up for fajr today. Allah didn't give me that tawfiq. Please, Allah, can I be chosen tomorrow? Yeah. And then you're at peace with Allah, not with yourself. But when you're angry, I didn't, I missed my prayers today. I'm not saying you should go around missing your prayers deliberately, but if you get angry about missing your prayers, it's because the prayers it's about you. But once you say to yourself, Allah didn't bless me with the tahajjud, He didn't send that angel to me, He chose somebody else instead of me, then you just turn, please Allah, that's not, can't I get it tomorrow? And now you're at peace because you know it's Allah, not you. And as soon as you start to think, I did Hajj, it's different to, Allah chose me. And if you have that feeling, you never feel guilty. And that's what I think you were saying about mutma'inna bin nafs and mutma'inna bin Allah. Allahu a'lam. Just checking.
No, this is the Shaykh.
Any questions?
What advice do you give to somebody like, so recently I've been dealing with a lot of people and like they actually maybe like a lot of this should be right? Right? So I feel this it's like and when I'm with them it's like it's fire and how like it's so deep. Having to sit and listen to these people but they're like they've been wrong, so they're in pain from when they were younger and so forth. Just trying to encourage forgiveness and do the best way for them to be open and speak and listen to them at the same time though. It's like I'm finding it because it's like I'm hearing them saying I wish they earned this and then having to try and navigate this and I'm finding it difficult. So what advice do you have for me? And supporting my sisters who are going through this pain, but helping them see that it is the qadr of Allah. That it is the hawla wa la quwwata. Man la yarham la yurham. One of the show mercy is not show mercy. I'm seriously that I can feel it with passion. It's like the fire of hell is just everywhere and nobody wants to just have the rahmah for themselves. So help.
Do you feel angry? Is it you that's feeling angry?
I'm finding it difficult, to support them. I'm there, but it's like I'm listening, and I'm trying to say the right things and seem to obviously they lash out at me, and that's fine. But it's just like doing that best for them, saying the right things. I don't want to. I don't want them to. I don't want to please them in this pain. I want them to feel like they're heard. We were were wrong, it is wrong, but at the same time, I want you to look at them. So it is from Allah. I wasn't there. It's very good. I'm just finding it because it's just like the last few weeks, it's just becoming one after the other. One person, second person, third person. It's all the same thing. Resentment.
Do you want a Shaykh answer or a non-Shaykh answer?
I can get you a Liverpool. It's the shit.
She said she can get me a Liverpool.
Well, you're here now.
Shit, I'll come to Liverpool when I come to Liverpool.
All right.
He's going to have a much better answer than me, to be honest. But I found when I'm dealing with very angry people, while they're in a state of anger, like in the middle of it, it's as if all their other perceptions are closed off and they're not going to really listen to you. So you can't really introduce like, oh, this is la hawla wa quwwata billah, have sabr, akhi, kada. You know, when the Prophet ﷺ, the woman who lost her father and her brother and husband in one of the maharik, and the Prophet ﷺ tried to console her, and she didn't know who it was, and she said, "Anta lam tusab bi musibati." You know, you didn't go through what I went through. And then she realized that was the Prophet ﷺ. She came and apologized. She's like, "Innama sabr an sadmatul ula." Innama sabr an sadmatul ula. Patience is at the first sadma, at the initial calamity, and sabr is a maqam, right? Sabr, to be in that state of fortitude and resolve and patience. It's a state of being. It's not like an emotion that you feel at the particular time. It's whatever is going to come your way. الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. So they say إنا إليه راجعون because that's what the heart was already saying all the time. So it's just articulating what was already there in their heart. So if we're dealing with people who are not there, then we have to first get them to be in a position to listen. And you may just have to absorb and redirect. You know, redirect, talk about something else, or redirect them something else. Or remind them of other blessings that they may have that they're not seeing because they're focusing on this particular thing. And sometimes it could be change of venue, it could be taking a walk in the park, it could be all these things. And I would say don't feel the pressure that I have to convince them of the underlying tawheed of this particular principle while they're in that state of anger. When Sittina Aisha, one of the other wives of the Prophet did something and she like broke a plate. Prophet ﷺ didn't get angry at her. He said, "Innama gharat ummukum, gharat ummukum." Right? He kind of made like a joke about it. And she got a little jealous, big deal. People are already feeling the levity and the seriousness of their particular thing. Don't add to it. Make them feel lighter. And that's true when you go around people who are in a state of depression or anxiety and so forth. You want to give them levity, you want to give them ease, you want to give them, ariyahiyya and raha, and you should enter with a smiling face, wajh bashush, all these sorts of things. But you go in there and you're like just as serious as they are and just as frowning as they are. It only adds to where they're at. But you want to kind of help lift them out of that state and let them see it in a different light. At least, that's what I know. Shaykh Aziz has much better things to say about that.
That was a Shaykh answer. She comes to Liverpool, I'll give her. Are you from Liverpool? Can I? Have you been to Sefton Park? When? When was the last time you were in Sefton Park? Right, that's the problem. All right, being serious, my concern about your question is not about those people, it's about you. Because, when you're on the plane, and they give you the instructions, do you ever listen? No. One of the things they say is, put on your mask before attending to anybody else. I'm not worried about the other people, I'm worried about you. Because if you're starting to get angry, they shouldn't be offloading to you. And you shouldn't be listening to them because you're not the person. You need to, no, but if you're starting to feel that, because what you said, I feel like, you need to start to think about what's going on in you. And if you were from Nottingham, I would say, when was the last time you were in Woollerton Park? Good. Right. Because that's the answer, is you need to get to that state of peace with yourself before you can help anybody else. Because one of the biggest problems within helping and counseling people is that you're not in a good state, or you're not in a good enough state. And I can only give you examples from my world, which is the world of kids. I work with kids who are violent. I used to work with kids who were very, very violent. And I had an excellent guy that used to work with me. We worked like this. We were really in tune. And I remember there was one particular child who went into a really chaotic, traumatic situation, started to become very violent, and he needed to be restrained. My friend went to restrain him, and I just says, "You need a cup of tea." He says, "I don't." I says, "You need a cup of tea." And he says, "I don't." And I says, "You need a cup of tea. I am the head teacher. You need a cup of tea." And he says, "Okay," and he left. And I restrained the boy. I didn't restrain him. I didn't need to restrain him. And then he came back about 10 minutes later and he says, "I'm so grateful, thanks." And the reason I'm saying that is because I knew what he was going through, and he wasn't ready to restrain the child. When Sayyidina Ali Karamallahu Wajh was in battle, he was fearless. Somebody spat in his face, and he walked away. And the guy turned around, "Am I not good? Kill me. And you were about to kill me and you stopped." He says, "No." He says, "Why not?" He says, "I became angry. So I wasn't going to follow through with the battle act of fighting." Why? Because anger had come in. And I should apologize. I'm kind of teasing you a little bit. But the reality is, the reason I'm doing it is because I know I've been there. Once you're not in that state, people come and offload on you. You need to just say, "I need a cup of tea. I need to go to Woollerton Park, come back tomorrow. I need Sefton Park, come back tomorrow." And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. And you'll find that once you start to do that, you start to understand what the nafs really is. And you start to be able to find that peace in yourself, so you can find it in others, so you can find it in yourself because you're helping others. And it's a process of the nafs which needs to be dealt with. And I'm describing where I've been, and I know your answer. And like I say, he did say that kind of. Jazakumullah afwan minkum.
I told you you had the better answer.
Are there any men in this group? Just Wasim?
So, I had a phase in my life recently. In fact,
Sorry.
where basically I was like, I want to keep distance with negative people, bring that negative me, like me. And not having listened to this lecture, I feel as though that was my nafs, because you're lecturing others, you're thinking they're negative. Like, how would you, going forward, how would you face these people, or how would you deal with it? If there's certain people that bring negative energy, or just bring the worst out of you, without considering them as lesser people or negative people or bad people, how would you personally deal with it?
I would have dealt with it the way you did. Yeah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Suhbat al-khair khayr min al-wahda, wal-wahda khayr min suhbat as-su." He says, good company is better than being alone, but being alone is better than bad company. What does bad company mean? It brings the worst out of you. If there are people that don't bring the best out of you, don't just cut them off. You can't afford to waste your time in bad company. You can't, and you did the right thing. And it's not necessarily your nafs. It might be your nafs. I'm not saying it is, but the way you described it is they brought the worst out of you, so you cut yourself off from them. Until you're ready to have the kind of relationship which brings the best out of you. And if it doesn't, then don't go back. Sorry, sister. They want a Shaykh answer.
This is the
Give a dhikr. That means give it to the Shaykh.
So if I understood the question correctly, you're asking about how one may progress through the different types of nufus that we mentioned, and Did you mention like a zikr or something like that? Or? One thing I would say is, don't think of it as progressing from these things. As we said, and I really like what Shaykh Aziz says, Allah gives you the gift. You know, He's the one who brings you. It's not like you're propelling yourself. You just want to avail yourself and plead with Allah that He gives you those gifts. That's all we're trying to do. And have the proper, what we say, adab and etiquette while doing so. So whatever means are at our disposal, we do the best of it. So those 4 things I just mentioned earlier, those are important. And I would suggest as general advice, there's 3 types of dhikr, or 3 formulas every believer should be saying, I would say at least 100 times a day. And the first one be al-istighfar. This is prophetic practice. This ghain comes over the heart of the Prophet ﷺ, not a ghain of iniquity or vice, but something at a prophetic level, but nonetheless, he seeks forgiveness from Allah. So astaghfirullah, at least 100 in the day. La ilaha illallah, or any variation of that, La ilaha al-malik al-haq al-mubin, whatever, at least 100 times a day. And then the salat on the Prophet ﷺ, at least 100 times in a day. At the minimum, we should be doing that. And if you can do more of the salat on the Prophet ﷺ, then so be it. Especially if you're looking for guidance to be more prophetic in the way that you do things, I would say 1,000, if you can manage it. And it doesn't actually take that long. People think 1,000 times, that's a lot. Well, if you divide it, some in the morning, some in the afternoon, then, your tongue will grow accustomed, and the heart then will also take hold of this dhikr, inshallah. And like Sayyid Abdul said, good company, have other people who are doing it with you, good circle of friends, good community around you. These are the things that can make a huge difference in one's life if only, they take these small steps, inshallah, towards that.
Was there a particular salawat you were going to tell us? He just said do salawat. He didn't tell us what to say.
Any
Please.
formula. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Whatever is easiest for you, it's fine. Salat al-Fatih, as he said in the beginning, you can ask him for that. Anything.
Jazakumullah khair.
So I heard to our beautiful advice, our teachers, and Allah preserve and allow us to benefit from them. Before we finish the program, I ask for the Shaykh that we need to close us with the dua. And once the dua is complete, can I just ask for our brothers and sisters to kindly pack the chairs on the left-hand side of the room so that we can get ready for Maghrib Salat. For those who are fasting, please open your flask of water here, and inshallah we'll have it with Shaykh for closing us with the dua.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نسألك الهدى والتقوى والغنى ونستر من سترك الجميل. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا هب لنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. ويا الله يا الله يا الله بجاه أسماء الله وصفات الله وأنبياء الله ورسول الله والصالحين من عباد الله واقض حوائجنا ظاهرا وباطنا وما أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه وارزقنا حسن الخاتمة نصر الله فتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين إن على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك سألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في الدين والدنيا والآخرة. لك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد إذا ترضى ولك الحمد بعد الرضا ولك الحمد كالذي نقول لك الحمد كالذي تقول لك الحمد خير مما نقول ولك الحمد على كل حال. اللهم يا عالم السر منا لا تهتك الستر عنا وعافنا وعفو عنا وكنا حيث كنا. وأيقظ قلوبنا لك ونبهنا من غفلة عنك. وأيقظ قلوبنا لك ونبهنا من غفلة عنك. واجعل آخر كلامنا لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله وكما يليق بكماله. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين.
جزاكم الله خير.
جزاكم الله خير.